Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the 2019 Brain Health Online Summit. I am Amy Zelmer from Faces of TBI, and myself, along with Dr. Jeremy Schmo from Midwest Functional Neurology, we saw a need in the brain injury community for more training and education on alternative healthcare methods and modalities for those suffering from the lingering effects of a brain injury. So each week during the month of March, you are going to hear from a presenter who will share either their real life experience living with a brain injury or their experience working with brain injury patients. And today I am here with Dr. Tom O'Brien. And Dr. O'Brien is considered a Sherlock Holmes for chronic disease and teaches that recognizing and addressing the underlying mechanisms that activate an immune response is the map to the highway towards better health. He holds teaching faculty positions with the Institute for Functional Medicine and the National University of Health Sciences. He has trained and certified tens of thousands of practitioners around the world in advanced understanding of the impact of wheat sensitivity and the development of individual autoimmune diseases. In November of 2016, Dr. O'Brien released his book, Betrayal: The Autoimmune Disease Solution They're Not Telling You. So welcome to the summit, Dr. O'Brien. So thrilled to have you here this year.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure, Amy. I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And I'm really excited to jump into this. You are just one really smart guy, and I'm really excited to have you here and share your knowledge. And today we're talking about halting the brain's slow deterioration. And so I think this is a great subject. And, the autoimmune response, I had no idea. I never, I've heard of autoimmune disease, but I had no idea that when you have a head injury that it is impacted the way that it is. So I think this is really, really good information.
Yes. Autoimmune mechanisms are the underlying mechanism behind almost every degenerative disease. Every one, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, it doesn't matter, atherosclerosis, that the immune system is getting activated, creating inflammation. Most of us have heard that at the cellular level, every disease, as far as I know, is a disease of inflammation at the cellular level. So the question is it a brain cell or a kidney cell? Is it gasoline or kerosene? Where's the inflammation? Where's the fire coming from at the cellular level? And when and it's that inflammation that is the mechanisms of autoimmune diseases. So when you can reduce the inflammation, your immune system calms down. And by definition, your immune system must have caused down. It's not creating the inflammation anymore. Inflammation's not bad for you. You get a bug. If you drop an apple on the ground and you wipe it off and you eat it, and there's some bugs from the dirt on the apple, bad bacteria, your immune system's got to get activated immediately to take care of that. So having an immune system that creates inflammation is a good thing. It saves our lives. Mm-hmm. But having an immune system that creates too much inflammation is not a good thing. And that's what happens with head traumas. That's what happens with degenerative diseases, is that there's this inflammatory cascade that gets activated. And it's the inflammation that causes so much of the symptoms that people eventually have.
And when we're talking about inflammation, so in my case, I not only hit my head on the ground, I also dislocated my sternum, tore a bunch of muscles, detached a rib, so someone like me, I probably have a ton of inflammation going on in numerous places.
If you're driving down the road and you don't see it, but you hit a pothole on the right side and your right front wheel goes boom. I mean, really slams. You go, oh my God. Did the tire blow up? Or was it a flat? You're worrying for the first 10 seconds or so, and then the first 15 seconds, oh, okay, I guess it's okay. That kind of a pothole. Most of us have had that experience in our lives. When you hit that kind of a pothole and you drive away and the tire's fine, it's not fine. 6 months later, that tire has worn down more than all the other tires because it was out of balance. It got knocked out of balance. And then you're still driving your car and you can't tell, it's not that bad, but 6 months later, it's wearing down. You know, if you look at the tires and compare them. So when you have trauma, your body gets knocked out of balance. And so for some people with trauma, the inflammation is being primarily triggered by your tires being out of balance, by your rib that's not settled in again, that's the muscles have spasm and it's locked up. And every time you breathe, it's just torquing it a little bit, which creates the inflammation that keeps the muscle spasm, that keeps the whole thing like that. You know, there are so many things that can happen, but that's the mechanical. You know, I've got a book that came out in September, You Can Fix Your Brain. Just 1 hour a week to the best memory, productivity, and sleep you've ever had. And I'll get to the title in a little bit, and we'll come back to it, because that's not a cutesy title. It's the path to success, right? But in the book, I talk about thank you, honey. My wife just brought me, so this is shameless plug.
And by the way, I love the cover of your book.
Oh, thank you.
FYI.
2 weeks of working with the publishers before we got one that we felt really good about. But in the top right corner here, it says just 1 hour a week to the best memory, productivity, and sleep you've ever had. And we'll get to that. But in the book, I talk about there are 4 pillars that we have to consider with any health problem, including brain trauma. There are 4 pillars you have to look at. Because health, I see health as a pyramid. Well, there's 4 sides to a pyramid. There's the base, that's your structure, as the example I just gave, being ribs getting knocked out of balance, or your vertebra, or your shoulder. That's the structure. Then one side is the biochemistry, and that's what we eat and drink and the air we breathe, and how that might be contributing to inflammation. The next side is the emotional or spiritual, and that's the trauma of what happened, and so many different emotional things can come up that we're not conscious of them, but they're in the background, creating stress hormones that cause more inflammation. It just continues. And the last side of the pyramid is the electromagnetic. That electromagnetics, now for the first time in the history of humanity, we are being exposed to so many poisons in the world of electromagnetics that it's extremely dangerous, and it can cause any problem. Any one of the 4 components of the pyramid can cause any health problem. So if you have that kind of a big picture overview, then you know that it really makes a difference. If you have a sensitivity to a food, but you're fine when you eat it, you know, your joints are a little sore maybe the next day, it's no big deal. I really like ... whatever it is. Well, if you have a sensitivity to that food, you're creating more inflammation. And the inflammation keeps the dysfunctional pattern that's developed in the brain after a trauma. If there is a dysfunctional pattern, inflammation will keep it that way because your neurotransmitters stay knocked out of balance. So this concept of a bigger picture is really, really important, especially for brain trauma people, because their bodies have hit the pothole, and then there's stress, the emotional stress that comes up. And then if they're eating foods that they don't really give them, it's not a big deal in their lives, they're fine with it, or they think they're fine, all of those things can cause more inflammation, more symptomatology, and a very, very slow recovery. So the first step is to be thinking from the point of view, where's the inflammation coming from in my body? And just start asking questions. And as you start looking at it, it's overwhelming, everything that you learn as you do a deep dive into more health concepts. It's just overwhelming. That's why it's so important, 1 hour a week, just 1 hour a week, every Tuesday night after dinner, every Sunday morning after church, whenever it is. But every week, I'm going to devote 1 hour to just focusing a little more on inflammation, if that's the topic. And I'm just going to learn a little, really? Plastic containers, food containers, they contain phthalates. Yeah, that's the type of chemicals that mold plastic. And if I put my leftover chicken in a plastic container, the next day the chicken has phthalates in the chicken. Yeah, that's what happens. Or if I wrap my leftover corn on the cob with plastic wrap, the next day there's phthalates in the corn when I'm eating it. Yeah, that's happening. When you start learning all this stuff, it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And that you have to. So the only way to be successful that I've seen consistently with our patients is just 1 hour a week. Be patient. It's going to take you 6 months to dial this down. Do it everything you can that you should be doing now. But every week you're just going to learn a little bit more, and just a little bit more, and just a little bit more. And that's the protocol for success, because it depends on the individual as to what their bodies need. There's no cookbook approach to reducing inflammation in the brain. There's some basic things that help, but it has to be individual.
Mm-hmm. And like you just said, it has to be individual, and no two brain injuries are the same. No two recoveries are the same. I mean, that's what makes it such a hard and complex disease or injury.
Right.
But I think, like you're getting at with the autoimmune and inflammation, there are certain underlying things that are pretty common across the majority of people. And, like I said earlier, I didn't know anything about the autoimmune response to a brain injury. I had no idea it existed.
Right.
And the majority of people don't. And
Right.
the majority of people don't understand the eye connection when you've had a brain injury, which we talk about in another one of our summit episodes. But there's just so many underlying things that your neurologist or your general practitioner, they're not catching it. And
Right. Because
they're
it's
not
not that severe yet.
yet. And so, I think that's why it's so important that we talk about these things in these summits. And
Let me give you an example, if I may, because
yes.
you referenced the eyes. There's a condition called neuromyelitis optica. It's really great Scrabble words, right? It's a problem of the nerves of the eye. It looks like MS. It's kind of an offshoot of MS, but it's not MS. And the component fibers in the nerves, they get damaged in this disease. Those cells are called aquaporin. That's the name of the nerve cells that make up the nerves, a big component of the nerves that get damaged with this disease, NMO. If you have a food sensitivity to corn, soy, spinach, or tomato, your body fighting those foods or one of those foods, you make antibodies to fight those foods. The antibodies, because of something called molecular mimicry, sorry, it's another geek term, but it means you kind of look like the tomato that I'm fighting here. You kind of look like that. And so the antibody that's supposed to go after the tomato goes after the aquaporin cells in the nerve fibers of your eyes. And so that, or spinach or soy. Now, it's cool for the geeky kind of thing that in the Far East, 1/3 of all nerve diseases where the coating around the nerve called the myelin is destroyed, 1/3 of them are neuromyelitis optica. Why is that so common there? Because in the Far East, they eat a lot of spinach and soy. It's a large part of their diet. And so there's a larger percentage of people that will have a sensitivity to spinach or soy. And some of those people, depending on their genetics and how they've lived their life, terms, you eat a lot of tuna, you get mercury. And so then you're
Right.
more sensitive to stuff. Depending on your genetics and how you lived your life, more of those people may develop neuromyelitis optica because of the foods that they're eating. That's why we have to understand a little more about where is the inflammation coming from in my body now. And when you can identify that and you stop throwing gasoline on the fire, things start to cool down. And when things start to cool down, your brain has a better chance of healing. That when you're on fire throughout your body, your bloodstream's on fire. You know, these inflammatory chemicals are in the blood. The blood's just a highway. You know, it's just a highway carrying a lot of traffic. But if a large percentage of that traffic are inflammatory immune cells called cytokines, you're going to get a breach of your blood-brain barrier. Now, the blood-brain barrier is kind of like the netting inside a football helmet. You know, it's protecting you. And there's only really small molecules supposed to be able to go through that barrier. But what happens when you have inflammation in your bloodstream is that you get tears in the blood-brain barrier. And so it's called leaky brain. And many people have heard of leaky gut.
Right.
And they're going to hear a whole lot more about leaky brain in the years to come now. It's called a breach of the blood-brain barrier. And I call it B4, capital B number 4. So if you're following me on this, if I'm not going off too much on a tangent, you know, it all comes back to where is the inflammation coming from? That's the $1,000,000 question that you always want to ask.
You know, you brought up a good point with food sensitivity. And, you know, most people think of gluten and dairy as the top sensitivities, but you can be sensitive to a lot of things, you know, like you just mentioned corn, soy, tomato, spinach. Like, you know, you wouldn't think tomato and spinach, right? Um,
Right.
you know, so I mean, there's just so many things that you can be eating. And I know sugar is another really big one, eating sugar. Some people have a really, really inflamed response to sugar. Um,
There's 126 different negative mechanisms that get activated when you eat sugar. 126. Now, you know, it's like, you know, but there's nothing wrong with an organic, gluten-free blueberry muffin once in a while. I mean, who cares, you know? But you can't be doing lots of sugar every day. You just
mhm,
can't be doing that and
mhm.
expect to be healthy. It doesn't work.
And, you know, and I think especially in the early part of recovery, when you've got, you know, you've got the brain fog, you've got pain, you've got chronic headaches. You know, I look back, like I said, you know, I didn't find Jeremy for 2.5 years. Um, but had I found someone sooner, I mean, I just think of all the crap. I was eating crap because I couldn't cook. I
Yeah,
didn't know how to use the oven. I didn't know how to follow a recipe. So I was eating a lot of like microwave pre-made. And I mean, I mean, we
right.
know that that's terrible for you. And that's what I was feeding myself for like a year.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you have to survive. So the
Hmm.
bottom line is you do what it takes to survive. And but once you realize this stuff, you know, uh, when you don't know, you're okay. You know, you think
Right.
I'm doing my best. When you know that you don't know, that's when you have to give an hour a week, at least an hour
Yes.
a week to
Yes.
learn what do I need to do here to change the direction that I'm going in. And then when you know, you're getting better. So you have to ask the question, where's the inflammation coming from? And as you start to find those sources like you have, and the inflammation starts going down, you just notice you start functioning better.
Hmm. So, what are some ways that we can work on that inflammation? Obviously, diet is a big one.
Yeah, it's a huge one. The most common source of gasoline on the fire is what's on the end of your fork.
Hmm.
That's most common. Now, there are, you know, and we have to talk about the testing when you're looking at sensitivities to foods. And most of the testing is not, how do I say this? not comprehensive. That I'll give you the example of wheat, but the same is true for corn and dairy and others. With wheat, the reason your immune system fights it is because our bodies can't break the proteins down into each pearl of the pearl necklace. Proteins are like a pearl necklace. Hydrochloric acid undoes the clasp of a pearl necklace. Now you have a string of pearls. And the digestive enzymes that are made by your liver and your gallbladder and your pancreas and your microbiome, all these enzymes act as scissors to cut that pearl necklace smaller and smaller and smaller. Snip, 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 until you get down to each pearl of the pearl necklace. That's called an amino acid. And that goes right through the walls of the intestines into the bloodstream. And the amino acids are the building blocks to make new neurotransmitters, nerve hormones, to make new bone cells and muscle cells. So the amino acids from the food we eat that gets broken down, goes through the walls into the bloodstream, those amino acids are the building blocks. The problem is no human can break down wheat into each pearl of the pearl necklace. The best we can do is to break it into clumps of the pearl necklace. Those are called peptides. And they cause a tear in the inside wall of the intestines every time you eat. Every time you eat wheat, you get intestinal permeability. That's called the leaky gut. There are many studies published on this. Most doctors don't know it, and they think, oh, that's hogwash. No.
They don't believe it, yeah.
Yeah, just read the studies. But Mrs. Patient, you have an entire new body every 7 years. Some cells regenerate very quickly, like the inside of your guts every 3 to 5 days. Some cells are slower, like bone cells and brain cells are slower, but you build a new brain every few years. It's completely new. Every cell regenerates. So are you regenerating a cell that's at the same level of quality of function? Are you regenerating a cell that's at a lower level of quality of function? Or are you regenerating a cell that's at a higher level of quality of function? That's determined by the environment around that cell. So what does that mean? It means what you're eating and what you're breathing. That's what gets into your bloodstream. Now, wheat tears the lining every single time we eat it, every time. But the fastest growing cells are the inside lining of the gut. And so you have toast for breakfast, you tear the lining, it heals. You have a sandwich for lunch, you tear the lining, it heals. You have pasta for dinner, you tear the lining, it heals. Day after week after month after year until one day you don't heal anymore. Now you get these big molecules getting through into the bloodstream that shouldn't go through. They're called macromolecules. Now your immune system starts fighting that food, that macromolecule that got through, because it's not a building block that you can build new tissue with. This is some crud that got in the bloodstream. I better fight this. Your immune system starts fighting it. And that's the person that goes to get a blood test for foods and finds out they're sensitive to 15, 20 different foods. And they say, oh my God, that's everything I eat. Well, of course it is, because those macromolecules got through the blood, through the wall of the intestines into the bloodstream, and your immune system trying to protect you fights that stuff. So what do? You have to heal the leaky gut. And how do you do that? Well, read the books, 1 hour a week to learn how to do it, because it's not a simple pill that you take. But here's the kicker, and why I went through all of that. When you get a leaky gut, the blood tests are easy to do to identify it. Those same markers identifying antibodies attacking your gut, causing leaky gut, those same antibodies attack your brain, because your blood-brain barrier has the same cells, very similar cells, some other ones, but these cells that are for leaky gut, they have the same kind of cells in the brain. So if you've got these antibodies going through your bloodstream, they're all over your body, right? You drew the blood out of your arm, and so it's just what's in your bloodstream. It's just a highway. So those antibodies that cause the leaky gut also cause a leaky brain. And that's a real important takeaway that I emphasize in the book. And hopefully tonight people say, oh, so this leaky gut thing, I've heard something about that. So if I have a leaky gut, I've got a leaky brain? Yeah. And if you've got a leaky brain, what happens is that larger molecules get through before the breach of the blood-brain barrier. Larger molecules get through into the brain, and then the immune system of the brain, called the glial cells, they're bad news, the glial cells. We have 4 different immune systems in the body. One's in the gut, the 70 to 85% of all the immune systems in the gut. That's because we eat food. That's usually where the assault comes from. Then we have them in our liver, different kind of immune cells. Then there are the ones in the bloodstream, different kind of immune cells, and then the ones in the brain. Now, the ones in the gut are kind of like a 6-shooter, an old, 1850s 6-shooter. They fire these bullets, these chemical bullets. The ones in the liver are like the old shotgun. The ones in the bloodstream are special forces with high-powered rifles. The ones in your brain are bazookas. The glial cells are bazookas. So when they get activated, because you've got B4, a breach of the blood-brain barrier, and these molecules are getting in from the blood into the brain, the bazookas get activated. When the bazookas get activated, there's lots of explosions occurring in there to destroy whatever's trying to get into the brain. When there's lots of explosions in there destroying whatever's trying to get into the brain, you get collateral damage. When you get collateral damage in the brain tissue, your immune system makes more antibodies to attack and get rid of the damaged cells. That's the autoimmune mechanism that happens with brain injuries if you're eating foods causing intestinal permeability. So that's kind of the step by step by step of what happens. And I'm sorry, it's a little bit geeky, but I hope you'll listen to it again. I hope you get the series and listen to it again. And it'll take you, maybe it's going to take you 3 weeks, listening 1 hour a week, just 1 hour a week, that's all. All right, I'll listen to that again next week. And you say, wow, okay, that's right, you did say that. And by the 3rd week, you've got it. You understand this dynamic enough to motivate you to figure out, what am I eating that's causing inflammation right now? So,
and I'm smiling because as we're recording this, you're one of my very last recordings, but you're airing very early in the summit. And there's at least 3 other people. I mean, your analogies are all so spot on. And so it makes me happy. People are going to hear this every week about how the microglial cells work. And
marvelous.
They over attack things. So
yeah.
it's important to understand.
No, they don't over attack. They're trying to protect you. My opinion, the immune system is the armed forces in your body. It's the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, the Coast Guard, the Navy that's trying to protect you.
Right.
So most doctors say it's a immune system gone wild, and we have to shut it down. I propose you take anti-inflammatory drugs to function, of course, but you stop throwing gasoline on the fire. That's the concept behind functional medicine.
Yes.
Stop throwing gasoline on the fire and be grateful that your immune system is trying to protect you right now.
Yeah, it's such cool stuff. And
it really is. It really is.
Like you said, some of you might have to listen to this more than one time because it's a complicated, you've done a great job with analogies and I appreciate those analogies. I think it helps people visualize it better. It's a hard, you're a doctor, how long have you studied this?
Listen, on our honeymoon 2 years ago, we spent 6 weeks in Costa Rica because I can work anywhere if I have a computer, right? And I read 93 research papers on the blood-brain barrier on my honeymoon. I'm just a geeky guy, and my wife loved it. She had a great time. We had a great time. It was great. But I had to read these papers 2 times, go back and read half of that paper again. Say, what did they say? What? Oh, I didn't know that. What? So you have to listen to this more than once. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, the more you listen to it until you kind of got the flow of this one. Because if you get the flow of this one, all the other talks that you're going to hear, you'll listen to from the perspective, that's another mechanism that can cause inflammation
Yeah.
and a breach of the blood-brain barrier. That may be where some of my problems are coming from. Oh yeah, because it's triggering the breach of the blood-brain barrier before. That you'll be thinking that way, right? So, okay.
In this whole, I think inflammation is the buzzword of this year's summit.
Marvelous.
It's so important to understand that inflammation.
Yeah.
And going back to what we were talking about all the degenerative diseases, right? And how it all comes down to inflammation. And so a huge part of that is changing our diets, understanding.
What's on the end of your fork? That's right.
Mhm. Yep.
And I've got a suggestion for your listeners on that. Can you get my phone, please? You know,
It's nice to have an assistant.
yeah. 30 years ago, it would have taken a room, 30 by 30, it would have taken a room that size, full floor to ceiling of computers at MIT to have the computing power of what this phone has.
Yeah.
That the technology has improved so much, we take this for granted, but 30 years ago, people couldn't ever imagine that I could be anywhere in the world and say, Siri, convert meters to inches. And within 5 seconds, boom, you couldn't imagine that would occur. The same is true about laboratory medicine, that the technology has improved exponentially in the last 5 years. Mayo Clinic has wrote a couple of papers on this. They call it, and this is their language, a new era in laboratory medicine. But most of the laboratories aren't using the new technology. They've got great technology that is very helpful, but it's not cutting it. This stuff is cutting edge. You can look at 6,000 different things in one blood draw with 97 to 100% accuracy. This is like, what? I mean, it's paradigm shifting.
Yeah.
And it's the accuracy that's so important. They're called the zoomer tests. Because you zoom in. There's a wheat zoomer, dairy zoomer, lectin zoomer. For those of you that have read The Plant Paradox, that's all about lectins. Good book. Soy zoomer, corn zoomer. There's 6 or 7, and neural zoomer. That's what's so important, is neural zoomer. And that test, it's one blood draw, and you get 97 to 100% accuracy in a number of different primary foods that people are sensitive to. And you find out, what are the markers of inflammation in my brain right now? That's the neural zoomer. And you're going to see you got bad inflammation in your brain. Now, people used to come to see me, and my favorite patients were when they said, I've been to Mayo Clinic and they don't know what's wrong. And I'd say, that's great. Congratulations. And I did it just like that. They always looked at me like I'm a nutcase, right? That's really great. Because if you had a disease, Mayo Clinic would find it.
Right.
You have dysfunction. Something's not functioning right. So the tests we're going to do are functional tests, not the disease tests, because you've already had those done. Okay. And then we do these tests. They come back for the second visit, and they're nervous. Like, I'm nervous when I'm looking at my own test results, opening an envelope or something. We get nervous. And I look at the test results and I say, good news. You're a mess. Look at this. Look at all these problems that are here. This is great. And they start laughing. You know why it's great? Because this is all correctable.
Mm-hmm.
This is all correctable. That's what's great about it. This is a mess and this is not good at all. But there's a path out of this. There's a pathway to follow, and you can get out of this. But you want to know what your starting point is. That's why you do the neural zoomer, is so that you know, where are the markers of inflammation in my brain coming from, right? What markers do I have? Do I have antibodies to my cerebellum? Do I have viral antibodies, herpes? Do you know there's over 246 studies in the medical literature on herpes simplex 1, cold sores, and Alzheimer's. 240 studies, 246 studies on this.
The
But if you get,
correlation.
oh, yeah, absolutely. And when a person passes and they do autopsy and they look at that plaque, they find high concentrations of antibodies to herpes.
Wow.
That the beta amyloid was activated to protect you against the virus or to protect you against bacteria. And you find these different LPSs, different kinds of bacteria in there. That's why it's so great to do the blood test, because you say, oh, look, you got tons of antibodies to herpes. Oh, yeah, that's not good. Let's deal with that. And then you recheck it in 6 months to a year and you see, am I making progress? Am I in the right direction? Right? So you find a good doctor that knows about this kind of stuff, and you're all right, doc, educate me.
Mm-hmm.
1 hour a week, or you'll go in by then to a doc, and you've been doing the 1 hour a week now for 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks, whatever. And you know what you're talking about, not the technical stuff, but you know the direction you want to go in.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah. No, you had such a good point about going to Mayo Clinic and they found nothing,
Right.
which I think so many people watching will relate to. They've gone to the neurologist, found
Right.
nothing, right? Which is good because it means you
That's
don't
great.
have a brain bleed or an aneurysm or a tumor. Like there's nothing showing up on your MRI. That's great. So I think that was such a good little analogy about functional medicine versus
Yeah.
traditional medicine.
Let me give you another example of that for our listeners. When you develop symptoms, you come to a doctor with symptoms, whether it's the symptoms of diabetes or it's the migraines after a car accident, or whatever the symptoms are, recurrent miscarriages, it doesn't matter what the symptoms are. It's like you've fallen over a waterfall and you've crashed into the pond below, and you swim up to the surface and thank God I'm alive. And you're trying to stay afloat in this pond of diabetes or this pond of seizures. It doesn't matter what the pond, you're trying to stay afloat, but it's really hard to stay afloat because the water is so turbulent, because the waterfall keeps falling into the pond. So it's really turbulent water and it's hard to stay afloat. You're still living the lifestyle that caused the problem or is fueling the problem. You're living the lifestyle. So we need the life jacket. So you take the drugs, whatever they are, so you can function. Don't be silly. You take the drugs, but you don't stay in the pond taking the drugs. Swim over to the side of the pond, get out of the water, walk up the hill, walk back up the river, and figure out what fell in the river that carried you downstream and you fell over into the pond of whatever your symptoms are. That's what functional medicine is.
Mm-hmm.
Is a rational approach to figuring out where is the inflammation coming from.
Yeah. Well, this has been such good information. I'm just smiling because I'm like, this summit is just tying up so nicely in a nice, neat bow.
That's marvelous. That's really marvelous.
And Dr. O'Brien, you have a couple free gifts for our listeners. We've got Dr. Tom's Pantry Essentials, anti-inflammatory and brain-boosting staples, and a PDF, Best and Worst Foods. And so we'll be sure to have links to those. And we're also going to have a link to your book if you want to show us your book again.
Oh, thank you so much. That'd be really nice. It's number 1 in 7 categories on Amazon, and I'm
congratulations.
Really, thanks, because it's really a good book. It's all of these analogies that I'm talking about, really technical, geeky stuff, referencing the studies so that your doctors can read the studies on all this, but spoken in everyday language as best as I can do.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. O'Brien, I so appreciate you being here and being a part of this summit. I can't thank you enough for sharing and just spending your time with us today.
Oh, Amy, I'm so grateful for what you're doing out in the world. I've had so many patients I remember years past with head trauma and felt lost. And so it's really great what you're doing. You know, there's a thing about number of different studies show this. Doesn't matter what you're suffering from, that people do better. They respond better when they're in community.
Yeah.
When you're in community and you know you're not alone out there, and you might share ideas once in a while in a chat room or or in a meeting, whatever it is, you people heal faster. They feel better. Their pain is less when they're in community with others that have suffered similarly. So just a heads up, you guys, support this woman and what she does. You know, tell your friends if they have head trauma, just tell them about the website and all that, so that she can carry this message out to more people. So Amy,
Absolutely.
thanks so much for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next episode.